The air in the Blackwood Heights police precinct was thick, not with cigarette smoke like in the old movies, but with the sterile, metallic scent of stale coffee and barely contained dread. Detective Sergeant Elias Thorne, a man whose face was a map of sleepless nights and solved cases, stared at the file on his desk. It was light, too light for a murder. Missing persons. Specifically, a patrol officer, Officer Dana Vargas, 28, 5 years on the force, vanished 5 days ago while on a standard night patrol in Sector 4, the oldest and most forgotten part of Blackwood Heights, known locally as the Tangle. Her cruiser, Unit 407, was found abandoned on the corner of Ash and Cypress. No struggle, no blood, just the keys in the ignition and the radio mic dangling, transmitting only static, a high, whining sound that the tech guys couldn't explain. Another dead end, Thorne. Detective Maya McMillan, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator, leaned against the doorframe, nursing a lukewarm paper cup. Her voice was low, a necessary measure in a precinct that suddenly felt less like a fortress of law and more like a poorly lit waiting room. Worse than that, Mac. It's a clean slate. No witnesses, no CCTV coverage that far out. And the dashcam footage. Thorne pushed a button on his computer. The screen flickered to life. It showed the interior of Vargas's cruiser. Just before she vanished, the footage was time-stamped 2:17 a.m. Vargas was quiet, driving slowly. She checked her rearview mirror, frowned, then brought the car to a smooth stop. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Everything was normal, then, the anomaly. A sudden, sharp thump came from the trunk, vibrating the camera. Vargas froze, her hand hovering over her weapon. She waited, listening intently. After 30 seconds of silence, she spoke into the mic, her voice tense but professional. 407 to dispatch. I'm investigating a possible disturbance. Ash and Cypress. Checking the vehicle. She put the cruiser in park, opened the door, and stepped out. The last thing the camera recorded was the sudden, inexplicable failure of the car's interior light, a brief, complete darkness, followed by the sound of the driver's side door clicking shut. Not slammed, not forced. Just a soft, mechanical click. Mac squinted at the screen. She closed the door. Why? She was going to the trunk. Thorne paused the video, highlighting the timestamp 2:18 and 12 seconds a.m. The trunk latch remained locked. Forensics confirmed it. And Mac, listen to this next part. This is what's eating me. He unmuted the audio feed. For 10 seconds, there was silence, then the distinct sound of 2 rhythmic, slow knocks echoing from the trunk, louder than the first random thump, knock. Knock, then, a sound that made Mac's breath catch, a sound that wasn't a scream, or a plea, or a gunshot. It was a whisper right next to the mic, almost a sigh, but one word was chillingly clear, gone. Thorne killed the audio. That's it. Silence after that. Just the static whine. And the microphone, Mac, the mic was clipped back onto the holder. Neatly. Someone else did that, Mac stated, running a hand through her short hair. Someone took her, then tidied up. Maybe, Thorne said, leaning back, the fluorescent light reflecting the weariness in his eyes. But the patrol car was locked from the inside when we found it. How did they get out? And if a suspect was in the back, locked in the trunk, how did they whisper into the front mic, and then calmly lock the entire car? He tapped the file. I called the evidence lockup. Vargas's duty belt was in the back seat, folded. Her weapon, secured in its holster, was placed on top of the belt. It looks like a meticulous surrender, Mac. And this whole damn thing feels less like a crime, and more like an exit. Mac took a slow, deep breath, her eyes fixed on the empty driver's seat on the screen. A quiet exit, or a quiet invitation. She pushed off the doorframe. Where are the patrol records for Unit 407? I want every call she made, every stop, for the last month. We're looking for the ghost in the machine, Thorne. Something that crawled out of Sector 4 and walked into a locked car. Thorne nodded, his gaze distant. He wasn't looking at the video anymore. He was looking at the blank wall of the precinct, feeling a familiar, cold sensation, the way a predator feels the wind shift just before the scent of its prey reaches it. This wasn't just a missing person. This was the opening note of a symphony of something wrong with Blackwood Heights, and the precinct was about to be the stage. The static whine from the recording, the one the tech guys couldn't explain, seemed to briefly leak from the computer speakers, a low, unnerving hum. Knock. Knock. The precinct was quiet now. Too quiet. Thorne watched Mac disappear down the hall toward records, then turned back to his desk. He pulled out the old paper map of Blackwood Heights, a relic from the 80s, laminated and brittle, and found Sector 4. The Tangle.it was a jagged, ill-defined grid bordering the city's oldest cemetery and the decommissioned municipal water treatment plant. Ash and Cypress was right on the perimeter, a desolate crossroads where the streetlights often failed and the asphalt was cracked like dry river mud that he traced the route Unit 407 would have taken. Standard patrol loop. Nothing remarkable. Thorne picked up Vargas's personal effects bag, a heavy-duty plastic evidence bag, and emptied the contents onto his blotter. Standard issue, wallet, keys, phone. The phone was locked, naturally. He slid the plastic ID card from her wallet. Officer Dana Vargas. Underneath the photo, her signature was slightly smudged. Thorne frowned. It looked fresher than the card itself. He ran his thumb over the ink. It was definitely raised, almost like it had been signed recently, perhaps even after the card was printed years ago. He dismissed it as a manufacturing defect and moved to the keys. There was her apartment key, her cruiser key, which was also found in the cruiser, and a third, smaller, antique-looking key. It was brass, intricately worked, and seemed too delicate for any modern lock. It wasn't standard issue for anything. Thorne looked at the Blackwood Heights map again. He remembered Mac's last words, something that crawled out of Sector 4 and walked into a locked car. He grabbed a red marker and circled Ash and Cypress. Then, he started circling every other notable, deserted landmark in the Tangle. The cemetery. The treatment plant. An abandoned orphanage near the river. As he worked, his finger stopped on a small, unlabeled patch of land tucked between the cemetery and the treatment plant. It was an anomaly on the old map, a section that was simply white, unlike the surrounding green for parkland or gray for streets. That he pulled up the modern city planning database on his computer and cross-referenced the coordinates. The white patch was listed only as BHP SUB-01, municipal property, restricted access. The old-timers in the department sometimes muttered about an underground bunker or a failed municipal project from the Cold War era being buried out there. Mac returned, slamming a thick binder onto the desk. Got the patrol logs. Nothing until the last 3 weeks. She started changing her routine. Nothing major, just small deviations. Mac opened the binder, pointing to a handwritten note in the margin of a log entry from 2 weeks ago. She logged a self-initiated welfare check at an abandoned structure on Rutherford Road. Rutherford Road. Thorne stabbed the red marker onto the map. It ran right alongside the white patch, BHP SUB-01. What structure? Thorne asked. No details. I went to Rutherford. There's only one structure that fits the bill, the old Blackwood Heights holding cell, Mac said, her voice dropping. It was decommissioned in the 50s. A temporary intake facility before the main precinct was built. It's been condemned for decades. Nobody goes near it. Why did Vargas go there? Mac shook her head. I don't know. But look at this. She flipped the page. Last night of patrol. 10 minutes before she vanished. She was logged driving past Ash and Cypress, continued on the loop, but then, according to the GPS data, she suddenly made a U-turn and headed back to Ash and Cypress, where she stopped. Why the U-turn? That's the kicker, Mac said, her eyes narrowed. The last recorded outgoing communication before the vanishing, and before the U-turn, was a quick text to a blocked number. The message was just 3 symbols, plus. Thorne slowly reached for the small, antique brass key on his desk. He held it up. It glinted under the harsh light. "That key," Mac whispered, looking at the key, then at the map, and an unknown location. She was going back to the place where she was supposed to meet someone, or something. Thorne picked up the phone file again. "We need to figure out what this key opens, Mac. And who she was texting." "We're on it," Mac said, pulling out her own phone. But before she could dial, Thorne held up a hand that he noticed something Mac hadn't. The white patch on the old paper map, BHP SUB 01, was not entirely blank. Scratched lightly into the brittle lamination, barely visible in the precinct's poor light, was a tiny, faded symbol next to the restricted area, a small, inverted V shape that looked exactly like the symbol Officer Vargas's father, a disgraced detective who disappeared 20 years ago after a botched internal affairs investigation, used to scrawl on his notes. A symbol Thorne hadn't seen in 2 decades. "Mac," Thorne said, his voice flat with sudden realization. "This isn't just about Vargas going missing. This is something she was investigating. Something old. Something that involved her family." He looked at the empty hallways of the precinct. The heavy silence seemed to press in on them, punctuated only by the faint, persistent static whine leaking from the recovered patrol car radio, which they had moved to an evidence room down the hall, and for the first time, Elias Thorne realized the chilling truth. The quiet, echoing silence of the precinct wasn't a sign that the case was cold. It was the sound of the silence waiting for them. The inverted V, the mark of Detective Vargas Sr., on the map felt like a physical weight in Thorne's stomach. He hadn't just known Vargas's father, he had worked with him, and witnessed his slow, desperate decline 20 years ago when the investigation into the Silence killings collapsed and the elder Vargas vanished under a cloud of suspicion. "The old man's mark," Mac whispered, leaning closer to examine the faint scratch on the map. "What does it mean, Thorne?" "It means that whatever took Dana Vargas, it's connected to something that should have died 2 decades ago," Thorne replied, running his finger along Rutherford Road toward the old holding cell. "We're going to that holding cell first. Now." They drove in silence, the precinct's silence replaced by the rhythmic slap of the wipers against a fine, icy drizzle. Sector 4 was a maze of lightless streets and industrial skeletons. The air here smelled of damp earth and rust. The old Blackwood Heights holding cell stood like a squat, concrete mausoleum set back from Rutherford Road, surrounded by a chain-link fence rusted black with age. The front door was a heavy, steel slab, padlocked with 3 industrial-grade locks, layers of rust flaking off the hasp. No signs of forced entry, Mac observed, shining her flashlight beam on the locks. "Looks untouched since '55. Except for Vargas's welfare check," Thorne countered. He pulled the antique brass key from his pocket. It felt strangely warm against his palm. He looked at the largest, oldest padlock, a relic of pre-modern security. He inserted the brass key. It slid in smoothly, clicked once, and the heavy shackle sprang open with a loud, metallic thwang. Mac stared. "That key, it's a perfect fit. Vargas had access." They opened the door, and a rush of air, intensely cold and smelling of ozone and wet plaster, surged out. Thorne clicked on his powerful police flashlight. The entrance hall was small, leading to a circular corridor lined with cell blocks. The facility was an echo chamber. Every footstep, every cough, bounced off the damp concrete walls and returned as a distorted, prolonged phantom sound. "This is unsettling," Mac murmured, her hand instinctively resting near her weapon. "It was built to keep things quiet," Thorne said, remembering the minimal soundproofing required in the old municipal records. They didn't want the screams carrying to the main street. They moved through the corridor. The cells were standard, narrow, and iron-barred. Most were empty, containing only dust and discarded bird nests. In the final cell block, Cell 7, Mac stopped abruptly. "Thorne, look." On the rear wall, where the concrete was the smoothest, there was a fresh marking. It wasn't graffiti or vandalism. It was a faint, nearly invisible tracing, drawn not with chalk or paint, but possibly a fingernail or a sharpened piece of metal. It was a meticulous, detailed drawing of the Blackwood Heights police precinct itself. The drawing was unnerving. It wasn't a blueprint. It was an architectural rendering of the interior, the layout of their bullpen, the location of the records room, the evidence lockup, even the placement of Thorne's own desk. Every detail was correct, down to the 2 bullet holes Mac knew were patched in the breakroom wall from an accidental discharge 10 years ago. Next to the drawing of the precinct, Dana Vargas's service weapon, the one found neatly placed on her folded duty belt, was sketched in detail, and underneath the drawing of the gun, written in that same faint tracing, was a single, cryptic question: why the silence? Thorne felt a profound chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This wasn't just about Vargas's disappearance. Someone, or Vargas herself, deeply corrupted, had been using this abandoned facility as a meticulous base of operations, studying the precinct and its personnel. The silence killings, Thorne breathed, connecting the phrase to the cryptic question. That was the name the press gave the case Vargas Sr. was obsessed with. People vanished without a trace, no witnesses, no struggle. Just silence. Suddenly, Mac's flashlight beam caught a small anomaly high up near the ceiling vent. A piece of fabric was snagged on the rusted metal edge. She reached up and pulled it down. It was a small swatch of blue uniform fabric, frayed and slightly stiffened. Vargas's uniform, Mac said, her voice tight. But why is it up here? As she held the fabric, Thorne noticed the chilling stiffness wasn't dirt. He shone his light on the fragment. The fabric was saturated with something that had dried hard and transparent, leaving behind a crystalline, almost sugary residue. It wasn't blood, and it wasn't typical grime. It was something synthetic, something chemical. Just then, from somewhere deep inside the old facility, perhaps from a sublevel, a sound echoed up the circular stairwell near cell 7. It was a single, amplified, and impossibly clear thump. Thump. It was the exact sound they had heard coming from Unit 407's trunk just moments before Officer Vargas vanished. Thorne and Mac exchanged a terrified look. They were not alone. And whatever was here was still active. Thorne grabbed Mac's shoulder, pulling her back against the damp concrete wall. The single, amplified thump had stopped, but the reverberations felt like they were still shaking the soles of their boots. Down the stairs, Thorne whispered, gesturing toward the shadowy stairwell near cell 7. Quietly. The air grew immediately colder as they descended. The staircase was a spiral of crumbling concrete, leading down into pitch blackness. The cold air was laced with a new smell, sharp, medicinal, and faintly metallic, reminiscent of old X-ray film. The stairs opened into a vast, cylindrical chamber. This was the municipal property marked BHP SUB-01 on the old map, the Cold War relic. The space was enormous, designed to hold large, heavy equipment, but now it was mostly empty. The only light came from Thorne and Mac's flashlights, dancing across huge, condensation-soaked pipes lining the walls. In the center of the chamber sat a piece of equipment covered in a thick, yellowed tarpaulin. It looked like a massive, archaic electrical generator. The old water treatment plant used to pull power from a municipal grid here, Mac said quietly, her breath misting. This must be the substation. Suddenly, the silence was pierced by a low, persistent hum. It wasn't the static from the cruiser radio, this was deeper, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate inside their chests, causing a dull ache in their ears. Thorne pulled out his phone, navigating to the camera function. The humming is too low for the human ear to pinpoint the source clearly. Maybe the phone's mic can register the intensity. He held the phone up, scanning the walls. The hum intensified when he pointed the phone toward a specific section of the concrete wall, a section that was newer, smoother, and lacking the dampness of the rest of the chamber. It was a sealed-off entrance. Mac approached the seal, running a gloved hand over the cold surface. Fresh concrete. Sealed recently. And this is where the hum is strongest. Thorne lowered his phone and focused his flashlight. Embedded in the center of the sealed-off section was a small, square metallic plate. It wasn't a lock or a handle. It was a blank, heavy piece of iron. "This is too deliberate," Thorne muttered. Someone wanted something behind that wall and didn't want anyone getting back in. He reached for his tactical knife and scraped away the dried sealant around the edge of the plate. Underneath, etched into the iron itself, was a small, familiar symbol, the inverted V mark of Vargas Sr. "It's not just Vargas Sr.'s obsession, Mac," Thorne said, his voice grim. "He was here. He found this place." He stepped back and looked around the vast, echoing chamber. He noticed 4 thick steel anchor points set into the concrete floor, forming a perfect square around the sealed entrance. Whatever this room was used for, the central area was for containing something immense, or something that needed to be restrained. Mac shone her light on the ground near the sealed wall. "Look at this, Thorne." Etched into the concrete floor, near one of the anchor points, was a faint, nearly erased message. It was a crude depiction of a timeline, consisting of short vertical tally marks. Most were old, worn down, but at the end of the line, 2 tally marks stood out. They were distinctly newer, scratched deep into the floor. Point 1 tally mark was labeled, V Senior, 20 years. The second, newer mark was labeled, V Junior, 5 days. The cold, medicinal smell intensified. The low hum seemed to vibrate through the entire structure. The message was horrifyingly clear: this place had been waiting for the Vargas family. The father had been marked 2 decades ago. The daughter, Dana, 5 days ago. Thorne felt a sudden, profound spike of anxiety. "We have to breach this wall, Mac. Whatever is making that hum is connected to everything. It's solid concrete, Thorne. We need tools, backup, a warrant." Before Mac could finish, a sound cut her off. It wasn't a thump, or a whisper, or the hum. It was the distinct clatter of a set of keys dropping onto the concrete floor, coming from the shadowed entrance at the top of the stairs they had just ascended. They spun around, flashlights raised. Standing at the top of the stairwell, silhouetted against the weak light from the upper holding cell, was a figure. Tall, thin, and wearing a dark, unidentifiable uniform. The figure didn't move or speak. It simply stood there, an unnerving sentinel. Then, from the figure's position, came a sound, a slow, deliberate, unnervingly accurate imitation of Detective Elias Thorne's voice, captured years ago on a department training tape, whispering into the darkness of the sublevel. "The silence holds the truth." The figure vanished from the doorway instantly. The keys, still lying on the concrete floor at the top of the stairs, were Officer Dana Vargas's secondary key set. They had been dropped as a deliberate distraction, an open invitation. Thorne swore under his breath and started running toward the stairs. Mac grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "Thorne, wait. Don't chase. That thing didn't want to be caught, it wanted to lure us out of the substation. Look." She pointed her flashlight back at the sealed wall. The iron plate with the Vargas Sr. mark was now glowing faintly, the air around it shimmering with heat. The low hum was reaching a painful, unbearable intensity. The figure had been the distraction. The true threat was happening now, inside the sublevel. The wall was being activated. Mac's warning cut through Thorne's rush of adrenaline. He skidded to a stop, his eyes fixed on the glowing iron plate. The heat radiating off the newly sealed concrete was immediate and palpable, and the hum was now a grinding, teeth-on-edge drone. "It's pressurizing the room," Thorne shouted over the noise, pulling Mac back toward the perimeter wall. "It's using the substation's own machinery." They watched in horrifying fascination as the smooth, new concrete seal began to develop hairline cracks. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning dust. The humming sound wasn't just noise, it was a physical force. Suddenly, a small, square section of the wall, the area immediately surrounding the iron plate, didn't crack. It began to sink inward, smoothly and silently, like an elevator door opening in reverse. As the section of the wall recessed, the humming sound abruptly stopped. An immediate, profound silence enveloped the substation chamber. The cold returned, sharp and absolute. The opening revealed a narrow, vertical slit, not wide enough for a person to enter easily, but wide enough to look through. Inside was absolute darkness, deeper than any natural shadow. Mac cautiously approached the opening, shining her powerful flashlight beam into the void. "It's a chute, or a shaft. I can't see the bottom." "It's not a service shaft," Thorne said, pointing to the edges of the opening. They were lined with thick, sound-dampening foam, the same type used in anechoic chambers. "It's built to contain sound, Mac. Or to prevent sound from getting out." As they stood by the edge of the opening, Thorne noticed something near his feet, right where the recessed wall had been. It was a small, cylindrical metal object, perfectly polished that he picked it up. It was a modern, military-grade USB drive. "Check the drive, Mac." "I'll cover the chute," Thorne ordered, handing it over. Mac pulled out her laptop, a ruggedized, secure access model, and inserted the drive. It bypassed the internal security immediately, an unsettling sign that the device was designed to be opened on police hardware. The drive contained a single, massive file, labeled only 407 log.mp4. Mac opened the file. It was the complete, uncut dashcam footage from Unit 407, starting from the moment Officer Vargas stopped at Ash and Cypress. They watched the familiar sequence, Vargas stopping, the thump in the trunk, the moment she steps out and the light fails, the soft click of the door closing. Then, the footage continued after the static, showing a horrifying, unseen view from inside the locked car. The passenger seat was now illuminated by a single, pulsing green light emanating from the floor. Suddenly, a pair of hands, long, slender, and wearing no gloves, their skin unnaturally pale, appeared in the frame. They meticulously secured the microphone clip back onto the holder, just as Thorne had described, but the most disturbing detail was what the hands were holding. Between them, stretched taut, was a thin, nearly invisible metallic wire. Mac gasped. That was the whisper. They used the wire to pull the microphone right up to the passenger seat, to whisper, "Gone," and then put it back, making us think they were in the trunk. The hands moved again, delicately placing Vargas's folded duty belt and weapon onto the back seat. Then, one of the hands reached toward the driver's side door panel. It wasn't opening the door. It was reaching for the interior door lock switch. The hand hovered, then with a slow, deliberate movement, flipped the switch, locking the car from the inside. Just before the video ended, the camera caught the reflection of the figure in the darkened window. It was vague, distorted by the glass, but the shape was distinct. It was wearing a Blackwood Heights police uniform. A voice, deeper and more resonant than the earlier imitation, spoke clearly from the camera speaker, its tone calm and analytical. "The uniform allows passage. The silence secures the evidence." The footage cut off. It was someone on the inside, Thorne hissed, gripping the edge of the shaft opening. Someone who knew the protocols, knew the training tape, knew the precinct layout, and had access to Vargas's uniform. Mac yanked the USB drive out. "Thorne, the fabric we found, the uniform scrap with the residue. That explains the hands, the neatness, the knowledge. It's an inside job. But why the silence killings connection?" Before Thorne could answer, Mac pointed her flashlight into the dark shaft. The light beam hit the opposite wall, revealing a faint, horizontal line of dried, crystalline residue, the exact same residue found on the uniform scrap. The synthetic, sugary substance. "It's not just a drop-off point," Thorne realized, looking down the dark shaft. "Whatever that stuff is, it was transported through here. And it looks like the shaft goes straight down to the restricted property, BHP, SUB-01. He looked back at the recessed opening. It was already beginning to rise, the quiet mechanical whine replacing the silence. The entrance was sealing itself once more. Thorne pulled Mac away just as the heavy, sound-dampening wall slammed shut with a final, metallic clang. The hum immediately returned, loud and grating. But now, it was different. It wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from above them. They looked up at the ceiling of the vast substation. The low-frequency sound was causing the condensation on the overhead pipes to vibrate violently, sending small, regular drops of water falling onto the floor. Drip. Drip. Drip, and with every drop, the hum seemed to intensify, reaching a crescendo that felt like it was tearing the very concrete apart. "We have to get out now, Thorne," Mac yelled, covering her ears. "This place is going to collapse." Thorne looked desperately at the sealed wall. The message was clear. They were trapped between a physical threat and the horrifying implication of the video. The case wasn't about finding a missing officer, it was about exposing a predator wearing a badge. And that predator knew they were here. The cacophony in the sublevel was unbearable. The low-frequency hum had reached a destabilizing pitch, rattling the metal pipes and making the massive concrete ceiling groan. Mac was right, the structure was failing. Thorne pulled Mac toward the stairs, navigating the slick, damp floor. "We're going back to the precinct. This isn't a crime scene anymore, Mac, it's a trap." They scrambled up the spiral staircase. The keys to Vargas's patrol car still lay glinting on the top step, a macabre invitation. Thorne paused only long enough to snatch them up, his gloved hand closing around the cold metal. As they reached the old holding cell corridor, the sound of the raging hum was slightly muffled, but still pervasive. The air in the facility above was now intensely cold, and the smell of ozone and medicine was overwhelming. Mac stopped by cell 7, where the drawing of the precinct was etched into the wall. She pointed her flashlight at the ceiling. "The vent, Thorne. The one where the uniform scrap was caught. That sound, it's focused right here." Thorne looked up. The rusted metal vent cover was vibrating so violently it was blurring. Suddenly, with a screech of tearing metal, the vent cover shot away from the ceiling, slamming against the far wall. A concentrated, blinding beam of pure white light poured from the open vent shaft, cutting through the darkness of the cell block and focusing directly on the wall drawing of the precinct. The light seemed to be actively heating the concrete surface. The faint lines of the etching, the bullpen, Thorne's desk, the evidence room, began to darken and glow a sickly yellow. "It's some kind of focused acoustic weapon, maybe high-powered sonic cleaning," Thorne yelled, shielding his eyes. "It's trying to erase the evidence." Mac saw something else. On the wall, where the white light was hitting the drawing of the precinct, the symbol below the sketched gun, "Why the Silence," began to visibly fade, then completely disappeared, but in its place, as the scorching light continued, a new message started to emerge, written in the same precise, faint script, hidden underneath the first question. That IT was a single, 4-digit number, 2005. "The year," Mac shouted. "That's the year the Silence killings officially went cold, and Vargas Sr. disappeared." Before they could analyze it further, the light beam abruptly shifted. It moved from the drawing to the steel bars of cell 7. The metal instantly began to glow cherry red, the searing heat was too close. Thorne grabbed Mac's arm and dragged her toward the main exit. "We're done here. This facility is compromised." They burst out of the old holding cell and into the icy drizzle of Rutherford Road. Thorne fumbled with the locks, securing the antique padlock back onto the steel door, a futile gesture, but a necessary ritual for a detective trying to regain control. As they drove away, looking in the rearview mirror, they saw a faint plume of smoke rising from the back of the old facility, visible above the chain-link fence. The hum faded behind them, replaced by the pounding of rain and the frantic pulse of the cruiser's engine. Back in the relative sanity of the police cruiser, Mac's hands were still trembling. The uniform, the specific knowledge, the technological sabotage. "Thorne, we're not just looking for a killer. We're looking for a ghost who knows the department better than we do." Thorne gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. 2005, that number is the key. Vargas Sr.'s disappearance was ruled a suicide, then later, official desertion. But what if he didn't disappear? What if he was silenced? He reached for the patrol car keys he had snatched from the staircase. They were a standard set, ignition, trunk, door. But one key was an older, metal version, the key to the evidence locker at the main precinct. Thorne realized he had only snatched 3 keys from the step. But the key set in his hand contained 4. The 4th key was a duplicate of the evidence locker key, one Thorne hadn't seen in decades, the one Vargas Sr. was supposed to have turned in before he vanished. His blood ran cold. The figure at the top of the stairs, the one wearing the uniform and whispering his own recorded voice, hadn't just dropped keys as a distraction. It had deliberately planted a piece of evidence for him to find. "They're not trying to stop us, Mac," Thorne muttered, looking toward the dark outline of the Blackwood Heights precinct on the horizon. "They're guiding us. They wanted us to find 2005 and this key." Mac opened the binder with Vargas's patrol logs again. She flipped to the last page and pointed to the cryptic text message Vargas had sent just before the U-turn, plus. She was going back to Ash and Cypress to exchange this brass key for something else, Mac concluded. And whatever she exchanged it for, it led to the locked car, the uniform, and the silence. Thorne pulled the cruiser into the precinct parking lot. It was unnervingly empty, even for this hour. The windows of the main building were dark, save for the single light on the third floor, their office. "We go back inside," Thorne said, cutting the engine. "We use this key. We find out what was locked up in the evidence room in 2005. And we find out what this ghost is trying to tell us about the silence." As they stepped out of the car, the silence of the parking lot was suddenly broken by a faint, high-pitched noise. It was the familiar, constant static whine from Unit 407's recovered radio, which was currently stored in the evidence lockup deep inside the precinct. The sound was clear, amplified, and seemed to be coming from the main air vent directly over the precinct entrance. The ghost hadn't just lured them to the substation, it had now brought the chilling sound of the vanishing back home. The echoing precinct was about to live up to its name. The static whine overhead was a high, thin mosquito noise that raised the hairs on Thorne's arms. It was loud enough to suggest the radio was running at full volume, or worse, that the sound was being broadcast through the precinct's internal comms system. Thorne and Mac entered the empty, silent main floor. Every step echoed unnervingly. The static followed them, bouncing off the linoleum and the steel lockers, a constant reminder that their safe haven was now compromised. "If the ghost is here, why the static?" Mac whispered, drawing her weapon. "It's a distraction, a taunt, or a signal." "It's covering its tracks," Thorne countered, gripping the antique evidence key. "It knows we're here for the 2005 files. The noise prevents anyone from hearing what's going on down here." The evidence lockup was in the basement, a reinforced concrete vault secured by multiple layers of modern locks and keycard access. Thorne, Mac, and the chief of police were the only ones with the current access codes. They reached the heavy, steel vault door. Mac input the keycard in code. The modern electronic lock hissed and clicked open, but the vault had a secondary, older locking mechanism, a massive brass tumbler wheel installed in the 1960s, which had been left in place for redundancy. Thorne took the antique evidence key from Vargas Sr.'s set. It was heavy, worn smooth by decades of use. He inserted it into the tumbler lock and turned it. The tumbler spun with a deafening clack-clack-clack, instantly cutting through the omnipresent static whine. The second lock released, the door swung inward with a low, hydraulic groan, revealing the vault. Unlike the modern, digitized storage above, the basement vault was reserved for cold cases and sensitive material, rows of metal shelves packed with dusty, color-coded evidence boxes. The static whine inside the vault was overwhelming, confirming the patrol car radio was indeed running at max volume, located deep inside. "It's deep in the 2005 boxes," Thorne said, pulling on a pair of plastic evidence gloves. They navigated the narrow aisles, their flashlights cutting through the dust motes dancing in the air. Thorne found the aisle marked 2005 cold, silence killings. There, tucked deep on a shelf, was a sealed, tamper-proof evidence box, significantly larger than the others. Affixed to the front was a handwritten label, Unit 407, Internal. Thorne and Mac exchanged a look. Unit 407, Vargas's current patrol car, was brand new. It shouldn't have an internal box from 2005. Thorne carefully cut the tape and opened the box. Inside, resting on a layer of acid-free paper, was the missing piece of the puzzle, a damaged, older model police radio. This was the source of the terrible static whine, confirmed by the tag to be from the original Unit 407, decommissioned in 2005. The radio was scarred, as if it had been melted, and its speaker was fused open, permanently broadcasting the static. A single, heavily worn patrolman's badge. The number was familiar, BHP 108. This was the badge number of Officer Richard "Rich" Kellerman, Vargas Sr.'s partner, who vanished shortly after Vargas Sr. in 2005. A small, sealed glass vial. It contained a small amount of the same crystalline, sugary residue they had found on the uniform scrap in the old holding cell. The evidence label listed the substance as unknown synthetic. Found at Rutherford Road substation. 2005, Kellerman, Mac breathed. Vargas Sr.'s partner. He didn't just disappear. He was tied to this substation, to this substance, and to this radio. Thorne picked up the melted radio. The static was so loud here that it felt like a vibration in his bones. He realized the truth. The constant static wasn't a signal or a cover. It was a recording that he shone his light close to the fused speaker and saw a tiny, almost imperceptible piece of paper jammed deep inside. Using a pair of tweezers, he carefully extracted it. It was a small, tightly folded receipt from the Blackwood Heights City Archives, dated October 12, 2005. The receipt detailed the borrowing of a single item, BHP SUB-01 architectural blueprints. The borrower's signature was illegible, but next to it, the clerk had scrawled a note, very nervous. Insisted on using an old, inverted V mark for identification. Vargas Sr. signed this out, Thorne confirmed. He knew about the substation, and he was planning something down there. As Thorne spoke, the lights in the evidence vault suddenly flickered and went dark. The modern electronic locks on the vault door began to click rapidly, locking them in the total blackness. Only the sound of the melted radio persisted, the static whine amplified by the vault's concrete walls, now echoing into an unbearable shriek. Then, from the heart of the static, something new began to emerge. A low, guttural voice, a mechanical distortion that sounded like a man drowning in static, spoke directly into the vault. The uniform allows passage, but the partnership never breaks. The sound of two rhythmic, slow knocks. The knock. Knock, from Unit 407's trunk, came not from the radio, but from the exterior of the vault door, as if someone were knocking directly on the heavy steel. They were trapped. The ghost, whoever wore the uniform, was outside the vault, and it was using the history of 2005 to communicate. Kellerman's badge, the substation blueprints, the radio static, it was all tied together. Thorne pulled out his cell phone, turning on the flashlight. Mac, forget the door. Kellerman's badge. Why would the killer plant his badge? It's a confession, or a final piece of evidence. Mac was already running her light over the badge, BHP 108. She noticed the metal felt slightly loose in its plastic mounting. She carefully pried it open. Tucked beneath the thin metal badge was a small, old-fashioned camera film canister. It's a microfilm, Thorne, she whispered, her voice tight with adrenaline. Kellerman hid something from 2005. Something his killer missed. The relentless knock. Knock, continued on the steel vault door, punctuated by the mechanical, static-choked voice outside. The silence was over. The echoing precinct was now screaming. Thorne and Mac huddled in the suffocating darkness of the vault. The relentless knock. Knock, echoing on the steel door, and the screeching static from the melted radio threatening to drive them insane. We need to see what's on this, Mac shouted over the noise, holding up the microfilm canister. It's the only way out. There's an old film viewer in the records annex, 3rd floor, Thorne yelled back. But we're locked in. And whoever is outside is toying with us. He grabbed a heavy metal crowbar used for moving storage boxes. The external lock is mechanized. We breached the internal tumbler, the one Vargas Sr.'s key opened. If we smash the mechanism, it might disable the magnetic seal. Mac nodded, quickly securing the evidence, the radio, the vial, and the film, into her trauma kit. Thorne swung the crowbar against the antique brass tumbler with a powerful crash. Sparks flew. The tumbler mechanism bent and seized. A high-pitched, electric screech came from the vault door, and the internal lights flickered back on, a dim, sickly yellow, the magnetic seal disengaged with a final, echoing THWUM. Go! Thorne yelled, yanking the heavy door open. They sprinted out of the basement and up the main stairs. The moment they left the vault, the relentless knock, and the static drowned voice stopped. The precinct returned to an unnerving silence, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. They just wanted us to see the evidence, Mac realized, slowing as they reached the third floor, near the records annex. They're leading us toward the truth, but why? The records annex was a maze of paper files. Mac quickly found the old microfilm viewing station, a bulky, green machine from the 70s. She loaded the canister from Kellerman's badge. Thorne stood watch at the entrance, his weapon drawn, scanning the empty, quiet bullpen. The tension was suffocating. Mac focused the image. The film was a sequence of still photos, taken in low light. The first few images were of the Rutherford Road substation, BHP SUB-01, taken from a hidden angle. They showed Detective Vargas Sr. and his partner, Officer Kellerman, working on the newly poured concrete wall, sealing the vertical shaft. They sealed the shaft themselves, Mac whispered. They were covering up whatever was down there in 2005. The next image was a detailed close-up of the substance found in the vial, the crystalline, sugary residue. It was smeared on a large metallic structure, too big to identify fully, but clearly massive, and bolted to the floor of the substation sublevel. Then came the money shot. The final image.it was a blurry, flashlit photo, taken quickly and in extreme close-up. It showed the face of a man screaming in terror. The man was in a police uniform, and his face was distorted by pain or fear, covered in the crystalline residue. Mac recognized the features instantly, Officer Dana Vargas's father, Detective Elias Vargas Sr. But the photo wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the figure standing behind him, holding the elder Vargas firmly. This second figure was also wearing a Blackwood Heights police uniform, but it was pristine, almost glowing in the dark. The face of the second figure was turned slightly away from the camera, but the flash illuminated a distinct feature, a jagged, horizontal scar running beneath his left ear and down his neck. Mac's voice cracked. "Thorne, get here. Now." Thorne moved to her side, leaning over the projector. When he saw the image, his face went rigid, all the color draining from it. He recognized the scar. He had seen it every day for years. "That's not Kellerman," Thorne breathed, his eyes wide with a mix of horror and dawning understanding. "Kellerman took this photo. The man holding Vargas Sr., the one who was silencing him in 2005. Thorne looked up from the glowing projection, his gaze sweeping across the dark, empty bullpen, his bullpen. "That man is Chief Leonard Hayes. The chief of police. The man who signed the order to classify the 2005 killings as cold, who approved the assignment of Unit 407 to Dana Vargas, and who currently held the master keys and access codes to the entire precinct. At that exact moment, the elevator to the third floor, located behind Thorne and Mac, chimed softly. Ding, the doors slid open. Standing there, bathed in the sickly yellow light of the hallway, was Chief Hayes. He was wearing his immaculate, pressed dress uniform. In his hand, he held a sleek, modern tablet, a device Thorne realized must have been controlling the noises, the lights, and the vault locks. Hayes smiled, a slow, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was fixed on the screen showing the damning 2005 photo. The resonance chamber worked perfectly, Detective Thorne, Hayes said, his voice calm, professional, and entirely devoid of emotion. "It seems my former partner, Rich Kellerman, was a better photographer than I gave him credit for." He pointed to the screen. Dana Vargas was close to finding her father's file, the file I marked internal in 2005. She was going to meet Kellerman 5 days ago, who I didn't kill, but who has been living underground, obsessed with clearing Vargas Sr.'s name. I couldn't allow that partnership to survive a second generation. Hayes looked at Thorne, his eyes chillingly empty. "You've been a good investigator, Elias. You followed the script I laid out perfectly. The truth is required. But the truth must end here. The silence must be maintained. Hayes raised the tablet. On the screen, the image of the precinct from cell 7, the one with the hidden message, popped up. Hayes tapped a single point on the screen. Thorne's desk. The lights in the records annex suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. Simultaneously, the elevator doors closed, and Chief Hayes disappeared, but his voice, clear and amplified, boomed through the building's emergency loudspeaker system. Attention all units. Major fire alarm activated. I repeat, major fire alarm activated on the 3rd floor. Evacuate the precinct immediately. Thorne knew it was a lie, but the chief had just sealed the entire 3rd floor. The ghost was no longer guiding them, he was coming for them. The lights had died, leaving the records annex in total blackness, punctuated only by the booming, fabricated emergency announcement echoing through the PA system. Major fire alarm activated. Evacuate the precinct immediately. The fire alarm is a lie, Mac stated, her voice tight but steady in the dark. He's trying to flush us out or lock down the area. We stick to the script, my laptop, the microfilm, and the evidence. Hayes pointed to my desk on the screen. Thorne hissed, drawing his weapon and using the beam of his tack light to cut through the oppressive darkness. He's telling us where the final piece is. My desk. They moved swiftly out of the records annex and back toward the bullpen. The 3rd floor was now an acoustic nightmare, the PA system blaring, the emergency lighting flashing weakly, and the continuous low hum of the precinct's ventilation system vibrating with an unnatural frequency, reminiscent of the substation. When they reached Thorne's desk, the scene was unsettlingly normal, yet menacing. Thorne's coffee mug, his stack of cold cases, the old leather blotter, everything was in place. Thorne ran his hands under the desk. His fingers immediately brushed against cold metal. It was a small, heavy safety deposit box, bolted securely to the underside of the steel desk frame. This wasn't here this morning, Thorne muttered, pulling at the box. It was locked with a modern digital keypad. Mac scanned the keypad with her flashlight. Hayes must have installed it recently, and put it on a timer or remote trigger. Thorne remembered the sequence from the surveillance video, the methodical steps of a uniform-wearing figure, the clean click of the car door, the neat placement of the mic and the gun. Everything was about order and control. The combination isn't random, Thorne said, his mind racing through the clues Hayes had presented. Vargas Sr. was obsessed with the silence killings. Hayes was obsessed with maintaining the silence. What's the perfect number sequence to secure that truth? Mac focused her light on the microfilm viewer, still glowing faintly in the distant annex. 2005. The year it went cold. And the number of the officer he used to finish the job, Dana Vargas, Unit 407. Thorne immediately punched in the numbers, 2005407. The keypad glowed green, and the lock clicked open with a decisive thud. Thorne wrenched the metal box open. Inside, there was a single item, resting on a velvet lining, a black, standard-issue Blackwood Heights police radio mic. That IT was identical to the one found in Unit 407, but this one was older, scuffed, and clearly decommissioned. It was the mic from the original Unit 407, the car involved in the 2005 incident, but this mic was functional. A small, sticky note was attached to the mic cord. Thorne peeled it off and read the clean, precise handwriting. The static is the key. The silence is the truth. Hayes isn't just hiding evidence, he's presenting it, Mac realized. He wanted us to find this. But why? Thorne examined the mic. It was built with a push-to-talk button, designed to connect directly to the precinct's main radio frequency, the same frequency currently broadcasting the fire alarm message. He pressed the PTT button and spoke into the mic, his voice low and firm. Hayes. This is Thorne. We have the box. We know about 2005 and Chief Hayes. Silence. Only the blare of the fire alarm and the ominous hum of the vents responded. Thorne tried again, his finger on the button. Dana Vargas. Where is she? She was a means to an end for the truth you want to bury, wasn't she? Suddenly, the fire alarm message cut off abruptly. The whole precinct went silent, save for the hum. Then, a voice, Hayes's calm, level voice, sounding crystal clear through the overhead speakers, came on the line, responding to the mic transmission. "No, Elias. You have it all wrong. Dana Vargas was the final piece of the apparatus. She wasn't silenced. She chose the silence." Thorne's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? Look closer at the radio Thorne is holding, Mac." Hayes commanded, ignoring Thorne and speaking directly to Mac through the PA system. "The key you found in the substation wasn't just Vargas Sr.'s. It was her legacy. The partnership never breaks." Mac snatched the mic from Thorne and shone her light on it. Near the PTT button, scratched deep into the plastic, was the familiar, inverted V of the Vargas family, but then, Mac's light caught a small, almost invisible modification on the mic cord, a specialized, amateur wiring job, leading to a tiny, concealed battery pack. "Thorne," Mac whispered, her eyes wide with dawning terror. "This mic, it's not just a transceiver. It's a detonator." The unnerving hum of the ventilation system intensified to a painful vibration. Suddenly, the ceiling tile above them cracked, and a fine, crystalline white powder began to filter down, settling on the desk and on the mic in Mac's hand. The same residue from the substation. Hayes's voice boomed over the speakers, no longer calm, but triumphant. "The crystalline compound is a reactive sound-amplifying explosive, Elias. Vargas Jr. synthesized it years ago. I only provided the location for deployment. That hum. It's the trigger frequency. It seems everyone is getting loud now, Elias. Including the ones I thought I had silenced 20 years ago." "He's not detonating the building," Thorne realized, looking at the powder falling on his desk. "He's detonating the evidence." The entire third floor was now trembling. The precinct, the sanctuary, the place of supposed order, was about to be blown apart to maintain the chief's dark secret. The realization hit Thorne like a physical blow. The crystalline powder filtering down was the sound-amplifying explosive, and the vibrating hum of the ventilation system was the detonating frequency. Hayes wasn't trying to just burn the files, he was planning a controlled demolition of the third floor, designed to look like a structural collapse caused by the fire alarm. "Drop the mic, Mac. Now." Thorne roared, grabbing her and tackling her away from the desk. The instant they hit the floor, the hum peaked into a deafening, oscillating scream. The desk, coated with the white powder, erupted not in fire, but in a silent, intensely rapid implosion of localized force. The metal crumpled inward, the crystalline residue vaporizing in a flash of soundless energy. The heavy safe deposit box was instantly flattened into a disk of mangled steel. The shockwave, though contained, was enough to rip the ceiling tiles off the grid and shatter the nearby windows. "He's creating a resonance cascade." Mac coughed, pushing debris off herself. The mic wasn't the target, it was the detonator for the desktop evidence. "He's erasing the last physical traces while we watch." Hayes's voice, now tinged with genuine manic intensity, boomed over the speakers. "You have 15 seconds, Elias. 15 seconds until the main ventilation conduit collapses. Find the true silence, or become part of the noise." Thorne saw the target, the large, gray main ventilation duct that ran across the ceiling of the bullpen. The hum was focused there, and the metal was visibly warping under the sonic stress. If it collapsed, the entire roof would follow. "He's giving us a chance, Mac," Thorne said, grabbing his remaining flashlight. "He wants us to find something else. He's a storyteller, a meticulous monster. Where is the final clue that ties Dana Vargas to this?" Mac scrambled toward the shattered windows. The uniform. The suit the ghost was wearing, the one that allowed passage. The one Vargas was supposed to meet Kellerman about. They realized the crucial missing detail: Chief Hayes could lock the building, trigger the explosives, and monitor them. But where was the true accomplice, Officer Dana Vargas, and where was her father's long-lost partner, Kellerman? Thorne remembered the chief's chilling words: Dana Vargas, she chose the silence. He said she chose it. And he talked about the partnership not breaking. Thorne ran toward the chief's office, located at the end of the bullpen, a clear, reinforced glass office overlooking the destruction. The truth isn't here, Mac. It's in the office of the chief. They sprinted toward the chief's door. It was locked, of course, with a heavy-duty magnetic lock that could withstand the blast. Thorne didn't hesitate. He raised his foot and kicked the reinforced glass panel near the handle. The glass spiderwebbed but held firm. The uniform allows passage. Mac yelled, realizing the deeper meaning. Dana's uniform was clean, pristine, like the one in the video. That was the uniform that entered the locked car. Thorne tried the key from the antique set, the key to the evidence locker. He slammed it against the modern keycard reader on Hayes's office door. The lock sparked violently, the outdated metal shorting the modern circuit. With a mechanical groan, the magnetic lock failed. They burst into Chief Hayes's office. It was surgically clean, dominated by a large mahogany desk. Thorne saw it immediately. Hanging on a hook behind the chief's door, under a protective plastic cover, was a perfectly preserved, Blackwood Heights police uniform. It was Dana Vargas's secondary, backup uniform, but it wasn't empty. It was stretched, distorted, and far too large. Mac, look inside, Thorne ordered, his voice barely a whisper. Mac slowly pulled back the plastic cover. Inside the uniform, suspended within the sleeves and torso, was a carefully constructed internal harness made of flexible synthetic tubing, wires, and small speakers. It was a sophisticated, flexible acoustic dampening suit built into the uniform lining. The harness was designed to do two things: dampen external sound, making the wearer virtually silent. The silence of the Killings Project sound. The tubing ran to a tiny speaker array near the collar, designed to project amplified whispers and imitations, explaining the voices in the patrol car and the substation. But the most horrifying detail was the battery pack sewn into the small of the back. It was identical to the one on the decommissioned radio mic. She wasn't captured, Thorne, Mac gasped, her voice raw. Hayes didn't kill her. Dana Vargas became the uniform. She's been the ghost all along, working with Kellerman, trying to expose Hayes by following the exact blueprint her father left behind. She pointed to the battery pack. It's draining rapidly. This suit is what Kellerman and Vargas Sr. planned in 2005, a way to move and communicate silently. Hayes just co-opted it. Suddenly, the speakers in Hayes's office crackled back to life. Hayes's voice was now strained, coming from a new, immediate location. Too late, Elias. The suit is the answer. But the end is the noise. Thorne looked up at the ceiling. The main vent conduit was tearing apart, dropping chunks of white, explosive-coated debris. The entire third floor was seconds from collapse. That he grabbed the nearest heavy object, the chief's ceremonial police baton, and slammed it against the harness. He had to disable the battery, the power source of the entire deception. The impact was met not with a crash, but with a sharp crackle of electricity. The speakers connected to the suit, designed to amplify sound, suddenly unleashed one final, deafening sound, not of static or a voice, but a single, pure, impossibly loud thump, the exact sound of the first anomaly in Unit 407's trunk. The final sound of the uniform being activated, the sheer acoustic force was enough to momentarily stun Thorne and Mac. When their vision cleared, the ceiling was giving way. But the noise had served a double purpose. Just as the thud faded, the glass partition of the chief's office shattered, revealing Chief Hayes standing on the far side, holding a piece of heavy equipment, a large, military-grade directional microphone that he wasn't running. He was waiting. Hayes is recording the collapse, Mac realized, horrified. He's going to record the final acoustic signature of the echoing precinct and use it as his perfect cover story. Hayes smiled, a flicker of pure madness in his eyes, and pressed a large record button on the microphone. The true battle for the truth was about to be recorded. Ong dan thong gio chin rach tok phia tren ho voi tiang kim loi by bien dang choi tai, rai soang bui tin nava and hung mang bi tong. Tran na chi con tin bang gase sup du. Kan sat truong Hayes, dung nai ben nguai vok non van fong by vo, cam cheek micro din hong lan, mat don chat veo muc m ton dang ghi, Thursday lai chow treo m ton hon hao cho loi noi doi qua hung. Su im lang fi doak bao ton, Elias, Hayes noi, Jong lan lung va doak quek dai boi chin thiet by ghi im qua han. Va on kung su that se la tiang on koi kung, hon hao. Thorn kong lang fi thoi john ka xian. On beat muc tu, fa hui ban ghim va lam john don tan so, mac, ho sak suav bui va chong vang v ku socim ton, de nan ra chia qua. Thuak no tin the fan ung voi am ton. Hayes dang Thursday lai su tsong hong bung no qua vu no. En hung nu ho dua veo motm ton gay nu, kong gay no ti sa, ko tuet vong chi veo bodu jiam am ton, trio tren mak, bodu van dang kolak tatu oti sao kai thorn dung dui cui dap veo bo pin. Bodu. No quek dai va fat am ton. Mac het len jua tiang sup du gamru. Mot vong lap fan hoi. Thorn hu ra bodu. Duak thiet could a tau raao on vmot bong ma va quek dai tiang ti tam, ko the duak bien ton vu kai gay on. On lai tum le dui cui gi lo qua kan sat truong va and dao lam com veo bo pin lo thien tren lung bo du nai lap tuc bung no nang luong. En hung cheek loa no shio duak en hung trong koao va teo dong fuk fat ramot tiang vang choi tai, bat ngo. Du kong fi la tiang yu, kung kong fi tiang ra. Du la am ton qua ban ghim gok tiang la het qua Vargas senior 2 fim 6 mo, doa quek dai hong non lan, fat ra 2 loa qua bodu va doi lai veo kak buk tuong bitong, huo ung nai lap tuc va ton kok. Vong lap fan hoi lan qua tiang het quek dai, tiang on koi kung, chan tu qua nam 2005, dap tang veo kan sat truong haze. Tan so sak net va bat ngo den muc lam qua tai cheek micro din hong qua han, Thursday bat dao fat ramot tiang rit the, din tine huk oc, haze dan roy micro va om dao, tam doi by chong vang boi kuok tan song thin giak. Nai bai geo, thorn. Mac het len, thorn lao ra koi van fong, bat na kan sat truong haze dang tam doi bat dong. Ho va man suang san ku lam vik, keen kak man vio lon lok, haze, bat chap kuok tan song bang em ton, van ko va quang lon. Han zon ra koi vong te qua thorn, ko gang voi le kao sung fuk vu de roy dui mot cheek bon du nat, kai haze voi le sung, mot cheek ben q hoa nang ni, fu de bui, dung dua tu bong toi qua tran na du nat suang. Dap man veo tai jung qua haze du guc soang, chong vang, te chi con catch kao sung vai fan, thorn va mac nin lem. Ngoi chen ven tren ton du qua ong dan thong geo, hi nra hin bong doi lap voit sai lo toi tren mai na, la mot nuoi dan ong. On tukong mac dong fuk kan sat, ma mac bo du bao ho cuky, din de dao mo, te cam mot don cap by cat dut. Don cap de ju cheek ben q hoa, nuoi dan ong den trong di suang, teep dat main hang. On ta. Gay go, lon tuoi, va q on mat bam de bui ban, en hung doi mat sang ruk voi tri thong min sakban, met moi. Rich Kellerman, thorn ti tam, nan ra nuoi dong doi by that sung tu en hung buck on hai muoi nam truak. Onda o de sutoi john qua. Kellerman gat down non gon, niam gi. Dui san na. Cham soc mai mak. Dana tim thay toi nam truak. Toi de che tau bo du cho ko I va dua cho ko I man ban du koi kung qua nam 2005, cheek chia qua dong. Ko I la bong ma, su dung bo dong fuk de len veo don kan sat by qua va vok tran han. On ta chi veo bo du. Bo du la ku hoch. No ko nia la su im lang, the ghi lai loi Thursday toi qua haze. Han ta de chi em dot no. Mak nin sung quan tran na dang sup du. Dana bai geo o dao. Ko I dang o noi ma bo dong fuk cho fep di qua, kellerman noi, di chien vi fire ka tang. Ko I dang hung den ongwan fat song koi kung, nguyen ban qua su im lang. Chung ta phi theo sao. Dot neen, kan sat truong haze, dang che mao and hung van ten tau, lao vi fire vu kai qua min. Mac fan ang nai lap tuc, de cao sung raxa. Haze kong ko gang lay sung nua. Thay veo du, han ta tum lay mot man bitong but diva nem no veo kellerman. Loi noi doi phi duok due tri. Haze gao len, su tuet vong quoi kung de fa vov nguai ben tin qua han, kellerman ne duok, and hung man bitong dap veo lan kan ka tang, tau ramot tiang klang lan, vang vong, tau ramot kan mua tiang on va bui tin the du soang ka tang, thorn beat ho kong the dan now voi haze o day. Tone bo tang dang du sup. On chop lay cheek micro din hung by haze bo lai, nem no cho mac. D. Fat song su that. Dung tan so qua bo du de ket noi micro. Thorn va kellerman lao vi fire ka tang, dui theo loi thot due not, va 6 tri qua Dana Vargas. Kai ho che, tiang koi dien quang qua kan sat truong vang vong fire sao, chi bai lan at boi tiang ren ri qua mai na dang sup du. Tang ba dang sup du. Su im lang dang by fa vo, kellerman dan duong, kong phi di suang, ma di len, hung bi phi qua sap tip kan ang ten vo twen no, him kai duok su dung tren mai na. Haze chi bit mean duok don kan sat, kellerman lao bao, kio min len mot cheek tang bao tri. Dana dang hung toi diem trian song koi kung, tan so ton ton fo. Ko ise su dung bo du de fat song su that koi kung cho tat ca moi nuoi. Thorn di theo, dong du nat qua don kan sat roi soang ben dui, chi con lai bao troi toi den va bong den loamo qua thap radio fire tren. Bui fat song koi kung, din tine huko si sap bat dao. Thorn and Kellerman burst onto the rooftop maintenance platform, battered and covered in soot. The air was cold and thin. Above them loomed the massive, skeletal structure of the precinct's radio antenna array, casting long, menacing shadows. Officer Dana Vargas, encased in a bulky, acoustic-dampening uniform, was crouched near the main transmitter box. The uniform's battery pack was fully spent, the internal wiring visibly smoking, but the small microphone array near her collar was clipped directly into the antenna's primary output cable. The hum was gone. The static was gone. The silence here was vast, broken only by the whistling of the wind and the distant sirens finally converging on the collapsing precinct. Mac appeared moments later, clutching Hayes's directional microphone and the microfilm. "Dana!" Thorne shouted, running toward her. "Hayes is down. We have the evidence, the film, the confession." Vargas looked up. Her eyes, visible through the haze of the broken helmet visor, were red-rimmed and resolute. She was exhausted, but her mission was not complete. He tried to silence the evidence. Detective Thorne, Vargas's voice was hoarse, amplified slightly by the suit's failing systems. "But the suit, it holds the frequency. The only way to stop the silence is to make the entire city listen to the truth of the echo." She pointed to the uniform's mic array, wired to the antenna. Kellerman's final modification. "It's not just transmitting sound, it's transmitting the acoustic resonance we found in the substation and the car. The sound of the silence itself." Suddenly, the steel access door to the rooftop burst open. Chief Hayes, bleeding from the head, staggered onto the platform, his face contorted with insane fury. He was holding a short, wickedly sharp piece of rebar he had ripped from the collapsed roof. "No. The truth is mine to control." Hayes shrieked, charging toward Vargas and the transmitter box. Thorne lunged to intercept, but Hayes feigned, swiping the rebar at the fragile antenna cable connecting Vargas's uniform to the transmitter. Clang. Hayes missed the cable, but the rebar struck the main antenna support structure, causing the entire tower to sway violently with a low, metallic groan. Vargas ignored Hayes. Her focus was on the transmitter box. She slammed the final switch. A momentary, overwhelming spike of energy shot through the antenna. There was no audible sound, no boom, no static. Only a visible wave of atmospheric energy that crackled across the rooftop, briefly illuminating the scene in a blue-white light. Then, across the entire city of Blackwood Heights, every police radio, every old dispatch box, every television set tuned to the local news frequency, and every modern phone within range that used the emergency alert system, simultaneously let out one final, unified sound. Not the voice of Vargas, or Kellerman, or Hayes. It was the pure, synthesized sound of the resonance cascade, the low, painful, oscillating hum, the frequency of the substation, the sound of the silence itself, transmitted at full power. It lasted only for 10 seconds, but those 10 seconds felt like an eternity. It was the sound of the place where truth was buried, broadcast to every citizen. The broadcast ended abruptly. The antenna array went silent. Dana Vargas slumped against the transmitter box, the uniform's battery completely dead. Hayes, momentarily stunned by the power surge, lunged again. "I will have the silence." Thorne reacted instantly. He used the butt of his weapon to sweep Hayes's legs out from under him, sending the chief tumbling backward toward the edge of the platform. Hayes clawed desperately at the steel grating, but the momentum was too great that he didn't scream. Hayes fell with only a dull, muffled thud onto the collapsing third floor below, his final sound absorbed by the ongoing disintegration of the precinct, a final victim of the echoing precinct's own deadly silence. Thorne rushed to Mac. "Did you record it?" Mac, though trembling, gave a grim nod, pointing to the directional microphone.